So I guess we can start right away. I have prepared just some kind of introduction for MSCP, just in case people viewing the Facebook Live would need some refresher or would just need more information on the project itself. So I'll start up with that, and then eventually people will get to connect themselves and start viewing the live. So yeah, so hello everyone, and welcome. This is quite exciting because it is MSCP's first Facebook Live ever, which is great. So I will share a glimpse of MSCP's background. So as an introduction, I'll start just by explaining a bit, like I said, the history behind the MESA Education Project, and then I'll leave the former volunteers we have right now with us, Emilia Martin and Anne-Constance Manchette. I'll leave them a couple minutes just to introduce themselves, and then we'll start asking some questions, discussing about their experiences in MESA. So this being said, I encourage the people viewing the live to also ask questions during the Facebook Live to the former volunteers in the chat room, and the Khalida Tardif, who is present in the Zoom as well, will take the time to read the question towards the end of the Facebook Live. So this being said, MSCP's history stems into a very deep historical background. In fact, we have to understand a bit the geography behind the situation of, well, the need for the creation of MSCP. In 2003, the project was created, and it was created during a context of internal conflict. It was created during an internal conflict. Sorry. I'll just pause a little bit because we have a new guest with us. This is Mary Perkins, has joined us briefly, but she is actually the person behind the creation of the project itself. She and her daughter interested in the situation of Myanmar in the 2000s, because there was a huge internal conflict during this period of actions, and mostly oppression from the military government at this point in time. This created a huge wave of internal but also external migration, which leads us to the point that interests us, Mesat, the little city on the border of Thailand and Myanmar. Because of these conflicts, there was the creation of many refugee camps along this border, and a migrant community also in Mesat. And this is where the project sends volunteers, and also this is where its interest begins. So this, in 2003, the goal of the project was to basically support schools along the border, but specifically in the region of Mesat. Because of this huge migration, there was an issue of fundamental access to fundamental services, such as education. It was hard for migrant children to have access to education in their own language, and thus there was a creation of migrant learning centers in which people from the community would teach in their own language, in Burmese. This being said, this is where Mary and the first team of volunteers came in. They began partnerships with a few schools, which some of them still last to this day. And today the goal of the project is still, again, to support the partners in their efforts to educate their children, but also in engaging with, in making sure that youth studying in Canada engage also and reflect in international and local issues in MESAT. And also this by being a volunteer English teacher in MESAT itself and in partner regions. So I will encourage first Emilia Martin and then Anne-Constance Blanchette to shortly introduce themselves and when
Carleton University. I'm an EdTech development coordinator, so I work with technology and education, and I recently finished a placement at UNESCO with the United Nations in Bangkok, working in gender equality in education. So very much still in the education world.
Thank you for that. Thank you everyone also for organizing this live. My name is Anne-Constance Blanchette, and I went to MESAT last year in 2019, right before the pandemic hit, which I consider myself extremely lucky that I got to live this experience before global crisis reached us. I was in my third year of university, so now I'm in my fourth year. I'm studying in business and global management and leadership. And so right now I'm in my final session and studying hard to try and get the good grades. And I'm hoping to work in a nonprofit organization, and it's something that the MESAT Educational Project has shown a light into while I was there, and so I'm very excited, and it's given me what I want to do in the future. So yeah.
Well, that's really nice. Both of you already kind of brought in a question that I'm going to ask you a bit later. And that's really interesting to know a bit. We'll come back to this, but also to know how the project actually impacted also your career choices and also your academic progress as well. So this being said, I want to first ask you both which primary elements drew you to the educational project of MESAT Education Project and this experience abroad in general. So if you want to start, Emilia.
So for me, when I was applying and looking at going to MESAT, I think it was a bit of a desire to learn more about education. Like I'd said, I suppose at the time I was finishing up a degree in psychology. It was good time, but not necessarily what I wanted to continue doing as a career. And I knew I was quite interested in education, and this really gave me an excellent experience of being able to dive really deeply into that field and figured out what I liked and didn't like about it in different aspects. And I knew that I wanted to work in some kind of humanitarian field. So obviously it checked that box as well. And I think just in general, I'd always wanted to go to Thailand. So that was more than icing on the cake.
Nice. And what about you, Anne-Constance?
Yeah, I think for me, volunteering has been a very big part of my life since I was in high school. And so when I saw this project, and it was my first year at Bishop's, I was like, oh my gosh, this is basically a present and I need to take it. I need to do this experience. I think it will be good for my growth. And looking back now, it absolutely is. And I think I traveled a lot because of my father's job, and but I would go to countries that were developed. So I never really experienced going into a town that had maybe less of the types of infrastructures that we find. And so there were just a lot of aspects that this project drew on to me, and that's why I decided to go.
Neat. Speaking of growth, was there any culture shock during your experience in MESOT, and perhaps also coming back to Canada, that really marked you and that you want to elaborate on as well? Emilia, if you want to start again.
I think the thing that comes kind of quickest to mind there is having students greet me at the beginning of every class. So going to class and having the group of 20 or 30 or 40 students all stand together and greet me every morning and at the end of class as well. I think at the beginning, I didn't quite know how to accept that or what to do with it, because it is quite different, especially from how we treat or how we greet teachers in Canada. So that was definitely a bit of a shock that I adjusted to. Coming back, I really didn't like having to leave my shoes on everywhere. In Thailand, it's very much a shoes off culture. Shoes off often in the classrooms for students as well, in a lot of stores, and obviously in the home. And I'm a shoes off kind of gal, so it was a lot to have to just keep my shoes on everywhere. But also it was winter, so it was good at the time. It worked out.
Yeah, of course. That is really, really interesting. And what about you and Constance?
Yeah, I think something interesting that Amelia mentioned is the way that they would greet you in class. But for me, it was rather the way that they would greet me outside of class. For example, they would put their hands crossed and they would bow their heads as they passed by you to show a sign of respect. And for me, that was very hard too. You know, I just wanted to, you don't have to do that for me. You know, I don't need you to do that. But for them, you know, it's how they show culture, how they show respect to the people that they think they owe it to. And then coming back to Canada, it was the amount of complaining that I was getting from my friends, my family, or anyone, like my bed is uncomfortable, or just small things that the water tastes so bad and from the tap, and you know, types of things that make you realize it really doesn't matter. We have everything that we need here, and out there some people don't even have drinking water from the tap. So it made me very proud of the experience that I had, because I was able to see that complaining was a little bit hypocritical.
You're really right. Actually, having been a former volunteer as well is something also that I've been through a lot. But this being said, we talked about how culturally people are much more formal, and also how the hierarchy also takes much more space. And this is something that you've experienced as volunteer teachers. And I'm sure that other elements were perhaps difficult to go through, or things that you would not have encountered necessarily in Canada. And did you have, I want to hear you perhaps about ways in which, or things that helped you to go through these things, like these changes, these different worldviews that you encountered there, and perhaps even coming back to Canada. How did you cope, or did you have friends, or was it discussing with friends? Was it other volunteers, or what helped you build some kind of security around these changing elements?
I think there's a few different things I've done in that regard, and I've been really lucky to, after MESOT as well, have traveled and worked in a few different countries. So not necessarily just for MESOT, but over the years, adjusting to things like culture shock. I think it's really important to keep balance in your life. So keeping a balance in this case of exploring and taking in everything around you, and then also having some time to process that, and also having a few kind of different things that, no matter where you are, kind of ground you back in maybe a sense of home. So for a lot of people, that can be music, or TV shows, or a hobby, or things. And in terms of talking to other people when you get back and them not necessarily understanding the experiences you've been through or different perspectives you may have now. And I found it very helpful to kind of know who I'm talking to and know that there are circles of people, and the former volunteers you've gone with are like an excellent starting point for that as well, but who've kind of experienced those same things or who are just very willing to listen and kind of process through with you. So knowing kind of who those support circles are and who you can talk with are very important.
Yeah, if I look back, I think I relied a lot on the committee of the MESAT project when I would need to talk about something that happened there. They just understood me, and there was no questions asked, or there was no. It was constantly just taken in, and yes, we believe you, yes. And Mary was there the entire time while we were in MESAT, and we were Skyping, and I think those kind of brought me back to reality, and just it's okay that it's happening, and being open-minded to possible situations that you might find yourself in, and things are going to be done differently, and that's just going to happen, and you have to embrace that different cultures do it differently.
Interesting. So in a lighter tone, I would like to know perhaps if there's something that really surprised you, like something a bit, it can be silly, it can be more serious as well, but is there something that really surprised you, perhaps sparked your interest, perhaps interested you in a certain way that you have seen or experienced in MESAT?
One thing that really surprised me when I was there, and that, you know, speaking of finding something to kind of have that feeling of home or fall back on if you're feeling a little bit homesick or culture shock, was finding a Dairy Queen, and knowing that that was there. Me and one of the other volunteers, I mean, we must have gone weekly to go and get a cone. It was also, it helped that it had air conditioning because it was in a shopping mall there. But I was surprised to find it. I was very pleased to find it. It was a lovely treat. So definitely the DQ.
I definitely went there as well, and it was great, I have to say.
Oh,
What
yeah.
about you, Coastal?
We also went there often, but I would say my something very surprising that happened. So, and it was towards the end. So I created, or with the headmaster, we went to a waterfall with my Pyokin students. And so we're all getting on a truck, and they line up the children, and then the teachers are handing them plastic bags. I'm like, oh, that's so strange. Like, that's so nice. They're going to be like picking up trash, or they're going to be like making sure everything is clean. Halfway through the ride, maybe half of the students, they start to vomit in the truck. I do not know if it was because they were not used to being in a car, but it was something. I was just standing there. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God. And they had brought medicine and lemons to smell and things to eat that are going to make them feel better and more, less nauseous. So that was something that surprised me, and I often think about it. And I have pictures of and videos of the students having their own plastic bags and like going into the truck together. Like, I didn't know it was going to go that way, but it was very fun.
It's so interesting. I wouldn't have guessed as well.
No.
I think it is very surprising.
Yeah.
But how nice also. Like, it's a good way to be prepared to these eventualities that would not have been fun. Someone being sick in a car and then you have to stay there for a few hours, or at least a good 30 minutes, is still not really great. Also, since we've talked about a lot of the ways in which you adapted to your life in MESAT, what do you see as necessary qualities for a volunteer to have in order to be well in MESAT?
Definitely an open mind or open-mindedness. So just being ready to experience new things, process them, and kind of just accept that, as Anne-Constance said, like some people just do things a different way in a different culture, and that can be a really beautiful thing, or it can be kind of a confusing thing at times. And I think especially for this project, also willingness and maybe even an eagerness to be teaching and to be kind of engaging in that education and school environment side of this, because that's obviously a very big part of the project, is teaching and being in class.
Yeah, open-mindedness was also one of mine. Going into this project, one has to be ready to experience anything, absolutely anything, and that it's okay. And also I would add perseverance. I think that, you know, there's going to be some rainy mornings where you don't really want to go to class, or there's going to be some nights that you're really tired and you don't want to create your lesson plan, but just got to go through and it's all worth it at the end.
Good. And we talked about open-mindedness, but I think that, you know, as I think it is a really important characteristic of any corporate, so anyone who works internationally, even we can go that general. I think that your moral compass takes a huge part, takes a huge importance. How did you perhaps sometimes have to look at use your moral compass and then also be open-minded? How did you kind of juggle with both of these concepts together during your experience?
I think if you're so in those kind of situations you find yourself in where you're maybe needing to draw a bit more on that open-mindedness and flexibility, and kind of leaning back on that moral compass, is knowing that you can always take time. So there's very few situations where a reaction or an action is needed just absolutely immediately. So there's almost always time to kind of sit back and process what you're seeing and what people are saying to you, and then also reaching out to others and, you know, maybe workshopping a bit and trying to figure out, you know, how you feel about something you saw or something you experienced. And the other volunteers are great for that, as are members of the project committee.
Yeah, I think this was probably one of my hardest, well, this question resembles my hardest problem while I was in Maysot. There were some sort of punishments that were used in schools that I had never seen before. And, you know, I got told it's their culture and it's not going to change overnight. And that was very, very difficult for me to accept, and to think that there was nothing that I could do about it while I was there. But that's why I have dedicated now a lot of my time researching into organizations that work against corporal punishments or these types of issues, and that's what I want to go into later. And I think that if I did not live this experience, I would not know what I would want to do in life. And I can always go back, and I think that's something that's kept me going. Is, you know, even though I don't really like what I'm seeing right now, I can go back and things are going to change one day. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know that Mary just wants to intervene, but it's a little bit why I wanted to question you on this. I think it's a really tough question, and anyone who works internationally has to ask themselves this question at some point, and it's something that still I am evolving in, and I am reflecting as well. And this is why I wanted to hear a bit where you were standing on this, knowing that you both have a background in being in traveling and also working internationally for you, Emilia, as well. So I'm just going to let Mary speak on this issue as well.
No, I just wanted to respond to what Anne Constance is saying, because I think it was a really, really hard example situation that Anne Constance gave. And she's not the first person to have encountered this, but it was an extreme case. And on one hand, yes, she had to step back and kind of come to terms with the fact that she wasn't going to change another culture. But on the other hand, quite subtly, because she paid attention and followed what was going on and was able to communicate it to other people who were in a position to intervene, the situation at the school has actually changed and evolved. And so that, you know, there are subtle ways in which one doesn't have to completely give up one's moral compass, as you put it, and become a total relativist. I think Anne Constance's moral compass was serving her really well. It was more a question of how do you communicate? To whom do you communicate when you have an issue of that sort? And that was a real learning process for her, probably for me as well. I think it had some good results. So it's a process, I guess I would say. But in your case, and Anne Constance is probably reluctant to go into great detail, which is appropriate. But I just want to say that I think her reflection and the process she went through ended up having some good effects there. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's good to reframe it also in how, because there are better ways than other to react in these contexts of your moral compass being in the way also of, or the culture, vice versa, the culture being in the way of your moral compass and vice versa. There are better ways than other to react for sure. So this being said, I want to know about how this experience made you perhaps question yourself. And then we talked a bit about that with Anne Constance, but and I want to know more in your about your environment during your time abroad, but also when you came back to Canada, how it perhaps impacted your way to see your life in Canada, and then perhaps your life goals eventually also.
I can maybe speak a bit about how it impacted my goals in my life moving forward. Obviously, like I said, I'd been studying psychology and I go to MESOT, and now I'm still working in education now. So it clearly had a fairly large impact on me and kind of my career path and my future studies, because I ended up going back to school. I think it made me question a lot my direction and where I wanted to work and the kind of work I wanted to be doing. I had maybe an inkling that I wanted to continue doing humanitarian work, but I think it really solidified kind of a need in myself to keep seeking out opportunities and positions that were going to be working to serve others or help others kind of however I could. And it's in a lot of ways kind of the same direction I'm going in now. So I think it made me question a lot kind of what I was surrounding myself with and where I was headed.
Okay, that's great. I think we'll have, I'm so sorry, Anne Constance, and I think at least you had some time to kind of answer this a bit in the previous question, but I think we'll have to end the part of the questions with this, and we'll have to jump perhaps to a few questions from the public. I want to ask perhaps Kalila how much time we have left on the live.
We actually have 8 minutes. We had some issues, but we can still reconnect if we have more questions to answer for sure.
Super. So we can perhaps, I'm going to leave the floor to Kalila to ask perhaps a few questions from the comment section on Facebook.
Yes, so we have, just a second. We actually have Lysander who was asking if you are still in touch with the people in MESOT. Loic replied as well as saying he is in contact, but we wanted to know your input on this as well.
So for me, it's been probably 4 or 5 years since I've been to MESOT. So at first I was in quite a bit of contact with a lot of the students I had. And now a few years later, there are definitely still a few who I keep in contact with and who I message with, especially on social media semi-regularly, which is really nice.
Yeah, I keep in touch with one teacher actually, and with a couple of students, and I'm still 1 year ago I did this project, so I still have quite a bit of connection with them, but it's always a little bit difficult because it is done through chat and texting, and so sometimes understanding each other, there's a lot of misunderstanding.
Sorry, I think I got cut for the end. I wonder if Mary would like to talk a little bit about the project we did last summer for the teaching adjustment, the sessions you did?
Do you mean the Zooming?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's been really tough during COVID because we all feel disconnected. Everyone does everywhere. And so we reached out to our partners in MESOT, and one of the schools, one actually that you were at, Amelia, BHSOH, has a group of students who were interested in Zooming in English. So once a week for about 11 weeks, we talked about climate change issues using Zoom, and I think we had quite a bit of fun. Anyhow, hopefully the students also think so. We divided them into 3 groups, and 2 former volunteers, Loic and Hannah, each took a group, and then Susan, our TEFL trainer, took a group as well, and I sort of oversaw that project. Since the beginning of November, we've started a second Zooming in English session. We have 2 groups, or we've divided the students into 2 groups, and we have 2 TEFL teachers. Susan is one, and Lee Sullivan-Lapp is another, here in Lennoxville, who are each working with 4 to 5 students to help them with their English. And these are young adults who are connecting with us on their phones. So you know, sometimes it's challenging. They are quite, they really know how to use their phones, however. And so we even share documents and are basically practicing English now. I'm not sure what'll happen in the winter. We might do a 3rd session, and we'll see what the students themselves want. It's a very tough situation in MESOT right now because the migrant schools are not allowed to open, and it's not looking like they'll be able to open until next summer, although conceivably that could change. But time is slipping away, and they're trying different things. They're using home-based learning. And so our Zooming is an effort to contribute to that in some way. And I'm also hoping in the winter we can get some kind of a pen pal project going with some of those same kids, or potentially with some younger students. Anything that will motivate them to continue to be interested in their education. I think that's it. If anyone has any questions, I could answer them.
Actually, Laurence was asking if the migrant schools are closed now because of COVID, which
yes,
you addressed.
That is why they're closed, and they were not allowed to open in June. They were told that if they met all sorts of a long list of criteria, that the boxes they had to tick in terms of creating an environment that would be safe, they would maybe be able to open. However, and that was supposed to happen at the beginning of October, but at the beginning of October, there were a few cases of COVID in the MESOT market, and a feeling that those had come across the border with people from Myanmar, from Mayawati, And so they were once again told they could not open, and that's been the situation since. Thai schools are open, so one wonders just a little bit, you know, if what the reasoning behind the situation is. Another rather sad development for us this week, and if this might be relevant to Laurence, is that Samuta School has had to close because of the situation. The school head was stuck on the other side of the border at the beginning of the school year, or when COVID started, and the border is closed. People are not permitted to cross, so she could not reopen her school, even if it was possible to reopen it, and now the school has been officially closed. And that's a new development in the last week or so.
Okay, I don't want to cut you, Mary, because all that you've been saying is very, very interesting and necessary also to understand the current situation of the project. But we have only 1 minute left, so I think that we would definitely need to end the live here unless there is a will for us to keep on going. But I think that perhaps we could arrange to do another live like this eventually. So I think we'll say goodbye, and thank you to Amelia Martin and Anne-Françoise Blanchette for having taken the time to answer these questions, and Mary for some facts and of interest about the project.
And I wanted to add that if you guys have any question, you are welcome to contact us via Facebook, Instagram, or even via email. We're more than happy to address your questions and concerns, and anything you might want to talk to us about.
Thank you very much to everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.